Lionsgate somehow managed 7 back-to-back flops in 9 weeks, and Kevin Costner burned through tens of millions chasing Horizon. It's like Hollywood's running a speed run on failure this year. Let's unpack this carnage. Megalopolis was almost never intended to succeed. It was Francis Ford Coppola's personal crusade. A passion project decades in the making. The film was rejected by many studios before Coppola himself put his $80 million in it. It's the kind of film you fund by selling a chunk of your wine empire for $500 million. Coppola poured his heart, and millions of his own money, into this $120 million epic, which Lionsgate agreed to distribute. The film, clocking in at 2 hours and 15 minutes, explores the clash between an idealistic architect and a pragmatic mayor as they rebuild a city after its destruction. But despite Coppola's vision and the big names attached, including Adam Driver and Giancarlo Esposito, audiences weren't sold. After 40 years in the making, Megalopolis finally hit theaters on September 27th and grossed just $13.7 million worldwide. The 2024 remake of The Crow is a prime example of a movie nobody asked for. Directed by Rupert Sanders, best known for flops like Ghost in the Shell, this $50 million reboot was doomed from the start. Bill Skarsgård stepped into the iconic role of Eric Draven, a character synonymous with the late Brandon Lee, whose tragic death during the filming of the 1994 original added a layer of untouchable legacy to the franchise. But instead of building on that, the remake stumbled hard, grossing just $21 million worldwide. Critics weren't kind either. The Crow remake opened to toxic reviews and currently sits at a rotten 22% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. A hitman with a terminal diagnosis taking out a contract on himself is a concept that sounds too wild to fail. But the killer's game somehow managed to miss the mark completely. With a $30 million budget, it pulled in a pitiful $5.9 million worldwide. Even with a cast featuring Dave Bautista, Pom Klementieff, Terry Crews, Sophia Boutella, and Ben Kingsley, it just didn't click. The film spent nearly 2 decades in development hell. Michael Keaton was attached back in 2005, and Jason Statham later took a turn, only for Lionsgate to finally release it on September 13, 2024, to terrible reviews. Critics didn't hold back, calling it a tepid hitman comedy that failed to make any bold moves. And Lionsgate? They're having a rough year, reporting a $163 million loss in the third quarter and seeing profits from their motion picture division drop by 96%. Kevin Costner's Horizon was supposed to be his passion project, but it turned into a financial nightmare. Costner put $38 million of his own money on the line, even mortgaging his Santa Barbara property to fund the film. With an official budget of $100 million, including marketing, the movie needed at least $65 million domestically to break even. Instead, it made just $38.2 million worldwide. Warner Brothers was so spooked by the lukewarm response to Part 1 that they pulled Part 2 from release. Even so, Costner refuses to give up on this project, as he's already spent almost 40 years bringing it to fruition. "I don't know how I'm going to do it," he said, "but I'm going to make it, and then I'm going to make the 4th one." Right now, Costner is meeting with all the billionaires to find backers for the remaining 2 chapters of his Western epic. Guy Ritchie's Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare was hyped as his version of Inglourious Basterds, but didn't live up to the promise. With a star-studded cast including Henry Cavill, Isa Gonzalez, Alan Ritchson, Henry Golding, and Alex Pettyfer, the film had all the ingredients for success. Yet, after its April 19, 2024 release, it bombed hard, grossing just $27.3 million on a $60 million budget. Critics were split. Some called it a lame version of The Man from U.N.C.L.E., and audiences weren't much kinder. Lionsgate pulled it after just 6 weeks, adding yet another failure to their already brutal year. Henry Cavill's second box office bomb of the year, and yet another swing and miss for Apple. Argylle, directed by Matthew Vaughn, hit theaters in February with sky-high expectations and crashed spectacularly. Critics shredded it, audiences ignored it, and the numbers speak for themselves. A $200 million budget and just $96 million in global box office earnings. Apple's marketing campaign overplayed its hand, plastering Cavill all over the promos, even though he barely appears in the film. Fans showed up for him but left furious at his minimal screen time. Vaughn's declining reputation didn't help, and neither did the mediocre reviews. There's a small silver lining. Argylle became the second most watched title on Apple TV Plus in April. But let's be honest, streaming popularity doesn't erase that theatrical failure. This romantic comedy, starring Scarlett Johansson as a marketing agent tasked with faking a moon landing, paired her with Channing Tatum. With a $100 million production budget, not counting marketing, Fly Me to the Moon grossed just $42 million worldwide. Delays didn't help either. Originally, Chris Evans was set to star alongside Johansson, but scheduling conflicts forced him out, and Tatum stepped in. Critics were lukewarm, calling it good but not great, and audiences apparently agreed. The marketing was a disaster too. The film was barely promoted, and when it was, it failed to create buzz. In the end, this safe, unremarkable rom-com didn't stand a chance. The sequel to 2019's billion-dollar hit Joker was supposed to be a guaranteed blockbuster. Instead, it turned into a box office nightmare. With a $200 million production budget and $100 million in marketing, the film needed $450 million to break even, and it didn't even come close. Pulled from theaters after just 6 weeks, the movie grossed $206 million globally, setting up Warner Brothers for a colossal loss of $150 million or more. Critics and audiences were divided. Comedian Tim Dillon, who had a minor role, called it the worst film ever made. Its musical numbers and twist ending alienated a lot of comic book fans. Yet, there are defenders. Quentin Tarantino praised Joaquin Phoenix's performance as one of the best I've ever seen and called the movie a bold fuck you to comic book geeks in Hollywood. With so many flops this year, it's almost easy to forget about Madame Web, but Sony probably wishes we would. Garnering a dismal 11% on Rotten Tomatoes, this film tells the origin story of Madame Web, Dakota Johnson, who must save 3 future Spider-Women from being hunted by a time-traveling, villainous Spider-Man. It's yet another uninspired Spider-Man-adjacent origin story from Sony, desperately trying to cash in on their Marvel property. Not even the star power of Dakota Johnson and Sydney Sweeney could rescue this mess. At the box office, Madame Web grossed just $100 million worldwide, an abysmal number for a superhero movie, especially given its $80 million budget. But the movie went from one of the year's most publicized bombs to one of its biggest streaming hits thanks to Netflix. Madame Web debuted at number 1 on Netflix's top 10, with viewers clocking in 1.16 billion minutes watched in its first week. Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt were riding high after Barbie and Oppenheimer in 2023. But their next big project, The Fall Guy, was exactly that, a fall. This action comedy about a stuntman who stumbles into a conspiracy lost Universal a reported $60 million. Despite stellar reviews, The Fall Guy grossed just $181 million worldwide against a $125 to $150 million production budget, failing to break even. Surprisingly, The Fall Guy found a second life on Peacock, breaking streaming records previously held by Oppenheimer. People were curious enough to check it out, just not in theaters, a growing trend Hollywood can't afford to ignore. Haven't heard of If? You're not alone. Directed by John Krasinski, If dives into a world where imaginary friends abandoned by their childhood creators live among us. Released on May 8, 2024, it had the right ingredients: John Krasinski, Ryan Reynolds, Steve Carell, and a premise oozing creativity. But creativity alone doesn't sell tickets. If grossed $190.3 million worldwide on a $110 million budget, with marketing costs factored in, it needed to hit $275 million just to break even, making it another bomb for 2024. However, the movie did manage a comeback. By July, If cracked the top 10 most popular movies on streaming and eventually climbed to the number 1 spot. When you hear Dwayne Johnson, Chris Evans, and Lucy Liu are headlining a movie. You expect an action-packed blockbuster, right? Well, Red One is a $250 million Christmas movie, and it's shaping up to be one of the year's biggest flops, bringing in just $84 million globally. Critics tore it apart, leaving it with a brutal 33% on Rotten Tomatoes. And honestly, that budget feels like someone lit money on fire. But the box office isn't the only issue. Reports allege Johnson's on-set behavior sent production costs soaring by an additional $50 million. Insiders claimed he was routinely late, sometimes by 8 hours, or didn't show up at all. A prequel to Mad Max Fury Road, Furiosa had high expectations. Anya Taylor-Joy and Chris Hemsworth lead the cast, and George Miller returned to direct. But despite stellar reviews and an 80% Rotten Tomatoes score, Furiosa stumbled at the box office, grossing $173 million worldwide against its $168 million budget. But Furiosa dominated the streaming charts, topping iTunes and Max after its theatrical run. So why didn't it thrive in theaters? Timing played a big role. Its premium large-format screens were handed over to Bad Boys Ride or Die in its third week. Plus, without Max himself prominently featured, Furiosa was a tough sell for casual fans. You'd think a movie starring Austin Butler, Tom Hardy, Michael Shannon, and Jodie Comer would be a no-brainer hit, right? Wrong. The Bikeriders barely scraped $36 million globally on a $30 to $40 million budget. It's frustrating because critics loved it, with an 80% score on Rotten Tomatoes. Jodie Comer, in particular, delivered a performance many consider Oscar-worthy. So what went wrong? For one, the film's slow pacing and lack of surprises didn't exactly make it mainstream-friendly. It's more of an homage to motorcycle movies than a groundbreaking entry in the genre. And while it struggled in theaters, the Bikeriders found some redemption on streaming, breaking into Peacock's top 10 most popular movies in late August. The movie follows Anthony Miller, Russell Crowe, a troubled actor unraveling on the set of his latest horror film, while his daughter questions if his behavior stems from his past addictions, or something far darker. Fans couldn't help but compare Crowe's character to his role in The Pope's Exorcist from just a year prior, making the Exorcism feel redundant at best. Critics and audiences alike shredded the movie, earning it a D Cinema score, the worst we've seen in months. Originally funded by Miramax and filmed back in 2019, the film got shelved during the pandemic, and it seems like Miramax realized it was a loss and offloaded it to cut their losses. Diane Keaton, Kathy Bates, Alfre Woodard, and Eugene Levy. Names like these should have guaranteed a hit. Instead, summer camp barely made a ripple. The movie follows three childhood friends revisiting the summer camp of their youth, but the laughs never land, and the script wastes its incredible cast. If you've never heard of this one, you're not alone. Summer camp came and went with no fanfare, and it's hard not to feel like even the studio wanted to bury it. Unlike other Diane Keaton comedies, this film is neither charming nor funny. It's just lazy. As the worst earner of the summer 2024, Summer Camp lives up to its name, forgettable and stuck in the background. Lakeith Stanfield's The Book of Clarence might have had potential, but its execution left audiences baffled. With a $40 million production budget, the movie earned just $6 million worldwide. Marketed as something between a parody and a heartfelt exploration of faith, the film didn't commit to either, leaving viewers confused. It was pulled from theaters after only 5 weeks, and while the concept might have worked under different circumstances, poor execution and mismatched marketing sank The Book of Clarence. Lakeith Stanfield won't probably be a lead again for a long time after this box office bomb. Ava DuVernay's origin aimed high, tackling the life of Isabel Wilkerson as she researched caste systems for her groundbreaking book. Premiering at the Venice International Film Festival, Origin entered theaters in early 2024, but struggled to find an audience. Its heavy themes and lack of a compelling marketing hook left viewers opting for lighter fare. Despite positive reviews, Origin grossed just $4.8 million worldwide against a $38 million budget and became one of the year's largest financial failures, losing over $33 million.